Israel regularly in the habit of blackmailing
Yeah,
and
I think,
bribing?
look, I'm glad you asked that question. Obviously, judges are susceptible to political pressure. That's normal. We all know that. You have to live in a very, uh,
Gotta live under a rock.
you have to live under a rock not to recognize that. And we all know that judges are susceptible to pressures, and they're also susceptible to uh, uh, enticements. If you find the wrong ruling, certain doors are going to. If you make the wrong decision, certain doors are going to be closed to you. You know, Donald Trump, he's just straight out about it. You know, he's now saying that Egypt and Jordan have to take the people from Gaza. And he said yesterday, he said, we give them a lot of money. They're going to do what we say. Very simple. And he's he's probably right.
Prices from one year to the next are the same. And
if you will speak very loudly about the war, you
He's
can...
not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country's in big trouble.
Can I
Wait a
answer?
minute. No, you've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning.
I know.
You're not winning this.
sorry. So tell you, gravitas can be difficult sometimes.
But you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You don't
God
know
bless.
that.
You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
You think-
You're gambling with World War III.
what do you think
You're
about?
gambling
What
with
do you
World
think
War
about?
III.
Communism versus capitalism is a debate that us tax-farmed people have with one another, while different forms of elites try to impose their own version of propaganda on different societies. So I'm going to try to explain that here and try to explain that we are stuck between a rock and a hard place, especially when looking at how Putin's Trump is making the liberal Western neoliberal ideology of world currency, exposing the moral bankruptcy that is no longer maintaining the no longer gold standard ideology of the US currency. So, modern capitalism takes different forms in the West and in China. Both face common questions about who truly benefits. Are these systems designed to enrich a small elite, or do they deliver broad prosperity and genuine upward mobility? And is that genuine upward mobility possible only to benefit that specific cabal in each society? So I'm going to explore these different systems in this podcast, Cyberfunkism's channel. And again, Cyberfunkism's is a channel that is blocked, shadow banned on all platforms. The reason is because I say crazy shit. And the reason I say crazy shit is because I want to, first of all, make curious people click on my work. And the problem specifically is that I only engage with people I disagree with. I actively engage with those that I disagree with. And as a result, in our It's Too Much Emotional Labor to Educate You, block people, ideology, and Reddit kicking off everyone who it deems as pro-Trump. I'm not even pro-Trump or anything, but, you just get kicked off. And that's one of the reasons why we see this inability of the left working together. What is solidarity? What does solidarity mean in a world where the left itself has normalized transactional solidarity through hive mind idioms that enforce neoliberal subjectivity and neoliberal social relationships and transactional solidarity? What do I mean by that? I mean, why should one group go on strike when it has nothing beneficial for them. We don't have kind of a long-term idea, right? We need all the groups to work together in a way. But this idea of transactional solidarity, which not only affects our interpersonal relationships, has destroyed the power of unionism, which is why I'm such a big fan of Elizabeth Fox Genovese and Hannah Arendt, and Daniel Tutt does a lot of work on this as well. I highly recommend that channel as opposed to the other guys that block our ability to talk, our ability to talk shit with each other. Equality is found in the dirt. We need to be able to talk shit, we need to be able to air out our differences. So we're going to go back to our analysis. So that's the general vibe. And what I'm working on right now is a PhD thesis regarding Jung and Hegel about this, creating a methodology for mythology, which can help us. It's so crazy to help us get out of this craziness, because in fact, Gnosticism is so on the ball in some sense, symbolically, with regards to who is in power, elite capture of ideology. So we have, on the one hand, socialism for the rich, capitalism for the poor, whether taxation is largely an elite extraction mechanism or a tool for societal good. And even if the welfare state is a kind of pacification, what are the emerging models that might address the flaws, both systems? So let's take a look. So is it prosperity or is it extraction in terms of Western capitalism? So Western liberal capitalism has historically delivered, obviously, remarkable economic growth, innovation, living standards. It provides meaningful prosperity and opportunity to a wide segment of society, specifically when balanced with democratic institutions and public investments. So in the mid-20th century, we saw a burgeoning middle class, high productivity, access, GI Bill, home ownership. Western countries built social safety nets and infrastructure that benefited the majority. In recent decades, wealth and decision-making have become increasingly constant at the top. Nancy Pelosi, trying to create her own. We just have to follow her stock portfolio and her policy making, and we see that obvious corruption. Trump does the exact same thing while, pointing to Pelosi. And I think the whole Trump is under Putin's thumb is real. That what we are experiencing is a giant propaganda war, what I call egregore wars. Within what we have to, these egregore are basically these ideological structures on either side, whether the KGB, China, CIA, and they control us through academia, through psychology, through so many different ways. On the other hand, there are critical perspectives that can be developed within each of those. And recently, we can see came out, GPT, obviously, hypocrisy of Sam Altman can be balanced by the recent DeepSeek efficiency. DeepSeek showing the ultimate hypocrisy that the OpenAI is not at all open. DeepSeek is more open. But then you use DeepSeek and ask some weird questions there, and it's not going to answer anything with regards to politically sensitive topics there. So we live in a world where political correctness of both ideologies, various types of political correctness. Musk has his own type of political correctness. If you critique him on Twitter, you will get less traction. You can't. That's the main goal of free speech. So Musk is not free speech. Zuckerberg is controlled. Reddit was supposed to be Aaron Schwartz, but that died. Google went from don't be evil to be very evil. All of them are under the thumb of stronger ideology. And you can look at Dr. Shiva, where he talks about how the backdoor of Twitter, and Dr. Shiva has his whole thing about that. And I actually have one video about Dr. Shiva as well. He's now gone off the political thing and he's going straight into health and trying to help people as much as he can there. And I think he's a very genuine in terms of his belief in helping all the people and destroying what he calls the swarm, which is a mythology that I also subscribe to. I call it the swarm of Gorgon snakes in my tinyurl.com/the year of the snakes, which is a long-term project that I have to do. So my first book is my PhD project about Jung and Hegel, and then my second book will be The Year of the Snakes, which is what I'm working on now. It's a monograph about the mythology of the snake. Another book is called The Idiomery, tinyurl.com/idiomery. The Idiomery is a documenting of all of these idioms that contain ideological practices within them. Like, oh my God, it's 2001 and I can't believe I have to explain this. Or all of these idiomatic ways that they control us. We are controlled in 3 different ways since the Roman Empire: bread, circuses, and what I'm identifying as idioms. The next book is about the clown, the gesture, and I'm going to do a whole monograph on the clown. And then all of that is going to be coming together in a work called Gorgon Wars. And Gorgon Wars are all these people that engage in the public sphere using prepackaged ideas and inability to think for themselves. And that's what I call Gorgon Wars. And Gorgon Wars is the smaller wars that take place in what I call the egregore wars. And the reason I have to talk like this is because our language itself is messed up. Our language itself, as I said, bread, circuses, and the third one is idioms and languages and hive mind idiom. And I am building up a bunch of definitions on Urban Dictionary. And one definition you could look up is called content internet. Content internet is a way by which I can avoid the shadow banning that is happening to my channel, Cyberfunkisms. And if you don't think that I'm being shadow banned, go check out my Twitter or check out reddit.com/rcyberfunk. Every community that I've ever tried to start has been subterfuged. So the only types of communities that they allow are those that agree with with one or the other ideological perspective. So once a person is born poor or wealthy in the West, they're likely to remain one or a status, like a wealth status across generation. So what do I mean? What does it mean to be capitalist? It means that you are under the thumb of, after the French Revolution, what did the smart nobility do? They moved their resources into becoming the first capitalists. Then another group of people, also the Dutch East India Company. Please go watch John Green's video, the best video that he's ever done on the Dutch East India Company, where that is kind of the original place that all of those, because that wealth is liquid, right? It moves. They can keep their colonial money through shell companies, right? They've been using shell companies since the beginning of capitalism, since the beginning of the invention of since the beginning of the French Revolution. We can say the first shell company was all these nobility moving their money into money laundering their way into not being nobility anymore. Of course, different kind of systems happened in different places. So we went from the Dutch East India Company to then the English took power. Basically, that currency, right? And I don't want to get too I don't want to get into anti-Semitic kind of rants here or something, but we can see that since the beginning, since Jesus' time, right, we had to pay. So one of the questions for Jesus was, should we pay the Romans their taxes? And Jesus smartly says that we should give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God's what is God's. What does that mean? It means that in the past, we had Athens and we had Athena and we had these city-states. And those city-states, you would pay homage. Why would you pay homage to that god? Well, because we had something called the Agricultural Revolution and savings. And with Agricultural Revolution savings, we have to convince people to put in their wealth into this savings for when times are good, and take out, when the floods, when the agricultural year is bad, we can, make sure that the society can sustain itself by giving back. But to explain all that to like a farmer, it's much easier to just have like some sort of religious explanation. Well, on the one hand, that's a more cynical perspective, but on the other hand, we can see with Agamben's idea of oikonomia that the birth of savings, the first thing that you have to do when you have savings, an army to defend the saving from the Mongolians or whoever, from the horse people, the people who live in the steppes. So we have to defend that saving. So what happens is those gods become tied to the state. So politics, economics, and religion are all born together. And even literature and language, if you go watch the extra history episode on the birth of literature, or the existence of writing, it's a 10-minute video, great one. So that's the thing. So we bring all of those things into what's called Athens, Athena, and we pay our homage. We pay the temple tax. However, there was one group of people that believed in a god, and they didn't want to pay that temple tax. Those were the monotheists, or whatever, the emerging monotheism of Judaism, where they had to basically convert their money into shekels so that they can that they can participate in the system in their own kosher way. That develops into the idea of charging interest. The first bankers in Italy are all connected into the first bankers of Amsterdam and Dutch East Company. So we have to basically follow the money in some sense. So I'm not saying it's any one group of people. I'm just saying that there is a historical regulatory capture. Okay, so let's get into the more modern time where economic elites leverage their wealth throughout history towards their own advantage. Financial political campaign, lobbying for favorable laws, influencing media and public discourse. That's on the top of it. But my argument is that it's not just influencing media and public discourse, but it goes much deeper than that. It goes into the very translation of Freudian analysis, and that early translations from Freud into the English-speaking world, that made sense, and that was important into making sure that we have some sort of neoliberal psychologism that is taking over and that is slowly taking over. And so that was very important. Just like they use recently, they're saying like oil, they repurposed oil to be a food, these seed oils or whatever, and now our whole economy is reliant on petroleum from Vaseline or all of these different things. So yeah, just as that's the case. So this is what we call like a historical regulatory capture. Regulatory capture, I think, is a popular nomenclature for this. Agencies meant to police industries instead serve them. So who will watch the watchers? Tax codes get filled with loopholes and cuts that benefit corporations and the wealthy, while labor protections erode, and in fact, even the idea of solidarity itself is eroded through those ideological perspectives that I said prior. Corporate consolidation plays a role. Industries concentrate, technology, finance into a few firms and their CEOs gain outsized influence over wages, prices, and government policies. Recently, we can see this with the weird situation of Elon Musk's son saying something very weird to Trump, the ultimate example of of what Bruno Latour calls the backstabbing of the rich. The Titanic, all of the rich are leaving on their boats while the ship is sinking, and we're about to enter into a new age of digital control, which is very scary. And that's what the main rant here is all about. We are past capitalism versus socialism. So a disproportionate share of the wealth is concentrated in all these societies. So even when there was Occupy Wall Street, when we tried to say, let's focus on the 1% and look at the Panama Papers, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more, right? What happened? We saw that identity politics and different forms of isms, feminisms, and all of these different ways in which we were watered down the idea that obviously we should have been focusing on the 1%, just like how the Me Too movement moved away from focusing on Epstein and onto Louis C.K. and Hassan Minaj's bad date or whatever. It was insane. They totally regulated the revolutionary potentials of Occupy. And so a vast majority of insecure people saw at that time that do they want to be in solidarity with this mass of brown, ugly people, poor people, or would it be better just to prostitute themselves to the 1%? And that was the unfortunate reality that we faced within the last couple of years, this transactional solidarity that eroded the possibility of working together, and then all of these justifications for the commodification of our relationships with one another, instead of seeing the power of the people united will never be divided, which was an unfortunate yelling that we were doing at the time. An unfortunate, they totally took over our ability of radical politics. I remember when we were doing, every commune that I worked in, every commune that I worked with had these people that would come and say like, oh, we are engaging in manarchism. We need to include people of this and people of that. Sure, but let's not forget that the 1% should have been, the focus should have always been on the 1%, not our interpersonal relationships. 1% that has been doubling since the late 1970s and in power since the late 1970s, since the growth of and the sense of since the decoupling from the American dollar from the gold currency. Claims of meritocracy are hollow when access to an education system that is totally propagandized, when we have to have like accredited investor to actually be a capitalist, while I can go and gamble all my money on some stupid slot machine on my phone. I'm totally able to do that, but the idea of I have to make $200,000 a year just to be able to participate in global capitalism, search up the idea of an accredited investor. It's insane. It's insane because we are totally controlled. On the other hand, we're told we have be kind idioms while we exploit surplus capital. It's like, oh, let's be kind and let's care about our mental health while our whole corporation is based on exploiting surplus capital. The moral bankruptcy is unfathomable, especially with the recent ethnocide that has taken place, as talked about with John Mearsheimer explains. Western capitalism can provide prosperity and inclusive policies, but it has also tended to evolve into an extraction system favoring specific groups of people, and what Dr. Shiva calls the swarm. Again, I highly love that metaphor, that symbology, that importance of mythology. And thus we go to China and the importance of understanding Chinese propaganda. One of our questions is, with regards to China, my interest in China is China. Sorry, I'm saying it so much. I sound like Trump. Is that the Chinese language is a wonderful language for seeing the origins of, the old origins of humanity, because it tends to maintain some ideology from the past. And that's why Mao's Cultural Revolution had to create simplified Chinese, because within the Chinese language there is a enforced hierarchy of within the culture itself, which is very interesting. It's an imperial culture. As a result, whereas the CCP started a long time ago with rooting out the mythological aspects, the religious superstitious aspect, don't write people's names in red ink, which I still follow. It destroyed its own temples, destroyed parts of the Great Wall of China. These are not sacred spaces in one sense. On the other hand, now in a world of postmodern meaninglessness, China is also looking back to its own roots. But the question is, when it's releasing these mythological movies about, for example, Shanhai Jing, these classic texts, or Journey to the West, when it's making those ideologies, is it following? How closely is it following those old ideologies? Or whereas, for example, the Monkey King, for example, might have rebellious tendencies. Those rebellious tendencies are kind of taken down for more, communal, something socialist friendly, so-called socialist friendly. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. When they kind of socialist wash those ancient ideologies, that could be a good thing, but in fact, it's kind of its own enforcement of political correctness that takes away the agency of the populations to learn for themselves. We are indeed cattle in many respects. So the question is, is China, who has lifted hundreds of millions out of dire poverty, 800 million over 40 years, the number of Chinese living on $1.90 a day fell by so much, accounting for nearly 3/4 of global extreme poverty reduction. So this is an amazing, staggering achievement, and one of the reasons why, in some senses, I believe in Chinese communism in some sense, because it provides meaningful prosperity and upward mobility for a giant segment of the population and not just elites. Here, Stephen Kropotkin, the Joe Pesci guy, is very important because, first of all, he says that Stalin is, he's genuinely believes in Stalinism, or Stalin genuinely believes in communism. Whereas the question now is, does Xi Jinping genuinely believe, or what's his ideological stance? So the government has directed massive investments into productive infrastructure, a kind of an education system, just the same, right? Just the same as the West. So we have to qualify education all the time because it's more like education within that system, and industrial capacity. It's created jobs and improved the quality of life of millions, as we are noticing. However, so we can see that the system is not purely extract. There is some sort of social contract in China in which economic improvement for the masses in exchange for continued party control. So the legitimacy of the party is based on its success rate, in a sense. And that's ironically very similar to this idea of Tianming, or Tianming, which is the heaven mandate, meaning as long as the emperor is following the dictates of fate, the Tao, he's being a good Daoda, then the economic consequences will be positive, and that's kind of their legitimacy. The irony of that type of legitimacy coming back from the back door, from the historical China, is interesting. So, but the question here isn't necessarily about all of that mobility. The question is more, does Chinese model, does it concentrate power in an elite? And if it does, is it a Leninist elite that's good for the idea of communism? Or does it actually raise questions about equity, inclusion, and actual egalitarianism? So the CCP and its cadres essentially monopolize, right, political power and heavily influence who is allowed to prosper in an economy. State-owned enterprises dominate key sectors, energy, finance, telecommunications, and they are, have to have politically connected managers in order to thrive. Even in the private sector, billionaires and tech CEOs must have some sort of party approval or acquiescence to thrive. As some of the outspoken tycoons are, as we can see, they're quickly reined in. Wealth has become highly concentrated and is now comparable to America. And the top 10% take home around 41% of the national. So we can still kind of argue that that's Leninist ideal. Well, we'll see. So there are, of course, these children of party officials that can do whatever the princelings, well-connected entrepreneurs, and the network of patronage often trumps merit. During various boom years, corruption and insider privatization deals allowed politically tied individuals to mass fortune. Mechanisms of control in Chinese state capitalism include the party's tight grip on career advancement, censorship and surveillance to prevent challenges to the system, policies that channel national wealth towards state objectives. Credit policies in China favor transferring wealth from households to corporations, and they boost big enterprises that are often state-linked at the expense of ordinary citizens' share of income. So there is some sort of tax farm extraction going around as well. Decision making is highly centralized. Average people have little say in various sectors of the life, including especially economic policy. For example, land in rural areas can be seized for development with limited compensation, benefiting developers and local officials. This kind of Chinese state capitalism maintains power by combining the economic growth potential of capitalism with a one-party political control. That the pie has grown, the party elite still decides the way it's sliced, and they do take a large part for themselves. And that's not necessarily the issue. Is about, for example, and various what we call the red nobility, which have offshore bank accounts, which kind of undermines the legitimacy, as was shown in the Panama Papers leak, which we had various members. Brother-in-law had British Virgin Island offshore shell companies, and there was even the daughter or the granddaughter of Mao, who also had offshore companies. Various Politburo members, the daughter of former Premier Li Peng, Li Shaolin. Okay, so there's like so many of these offshore accounts. On the other hand, we don't really know whether Xi Jinping himself has offshore accounts. The leader would never put those kinds of assets on his own name. We can still see that his family, his sister, the husband of the sister, various important people, the extended family had all of these offshore accounts that helped contextualize the Panama Paper disclosure. So the question is, how much can we trust this supposedly communist system if there are this sort of red nobility? The red nobility that, on the other hand, tries to have anti-corruption campaigns, or at least as a show, they have these anti-corruption campaigns to go after, for example, Jack Ma or other notable billionaires who don't necessarily walk the line. So while Chinese officials publicly condemn, offshore billionaires, condemn corruption and go after various billionaires, preach communist frugality, still there are a closed group of powerful families that have quietly moved assets overseas through offshore vehicles. It doesn't necessarily implicate Xi himself, but it shows an implicit understanding among China's elite that personal wealth is often shielded offshore, away from public scrutiny, if the CCP agrees with. It's not for everyone. So it's a selective corruption destruction. It's not a selective anti-corruption campaign. It's not everyone will follow the rules, including me, which is a dangerous question in our time of AI and our time of genetic engineering, where we are moving again. That's one of the central theses here. We're moving away from the questions of capitalism versus communism completely, in one sense. And what's also alarming is the fact that after the Panama Papers revealed all these hidden holding relatives of top officials, the red nobility, Chinese scrubbed all information and mention of such a story from news and social. That's kind of scary, because it's seeing those allegations being groundless. When it was the Panama Papers, it was awesome. Authorities aggressively censor any reporting on the overseas assets of China's ruling families, and this is not something that's restrained to just the Chinese speaking world. That's the crazy part about it, is that it's affecting our ideological perspectives in the West. And that's the crazy part about this whole Putin thing. And people arguing that Putin is a communist guy or whatever in some sense. That's crazy to me. He's a mafia guy. He's a KGB guy. He has done an excellent job in the last 10, 20 years to install that kind of, to change the American mind. All these pro-MAGA people are pro-Putin. That's a excellent, and he actually took over the American government using Trump, which is so crazy. That's a big victory. And again, we got to look at that weird situation with Elon Musk's son saying whatever he wanted to Trump. So the anti-corruption campaigns were kind of a political tool to see who's out and who's in. It's not about whether they actually follow like communist principles. It's whether they actually follow the rules of the game set by the specific red nobility. Again, all of this is becoming extremely important, because if we don't recognize that we are controlled by both sides, then we're going to be all dying for ideals like nationalism or socialism or whatever ism is. We're going to be on the front lines for something that is just not true. It's just a bunch of elites, various types of elites, creating various types of ideology, egregores that we all kind of follow. And even our debates within these ideological warfare are all circumspect, because even our language, right? Even our language is filled with these idioms that we are not able to see, that we are ruled in so many different ways. So let's go back, I guess, to the West. For example, the 2008 financial crises, where bailouts were only for my group of people. If we were truly capitalist, we would let these die. But the same people in the government were the same people being bailed out, and they couldn't, can't let the whole thing. It was too big to fail, whatever. That was insane. So lobbyists, shape bailout packages in their favor, and then governments fear that punishing a large bank or firm will have spillover effects and hurt millions of innocents, supposedly. But that's the argument that's made. But it's really contained to maintaining the power of the swarm. So again, we can't even talk about these things without constantly having to repeat the idioms of that that they keep imposing on. So we do have a kind of a moral hazard that has been normalized with too big to fail, and policymakers tempted to that are shielded from failure, while us poor people have to play the capitalist game. Capitalism, the poor, socialism, and bailout for the rich. And libertarians would say that this is state capitalism. And the dumb part about libertarianism is that I always tell them, what did Hayek say at the end of his life? Hayek said that if we apply market principles to currency itself, what happened? That's my question for libertarian anarchists, Stefan Molyneux. And I actually like all of these people that are not allowed to be on popular platform. That's how you know that their work is radical. And if you're not in any way progressive or radical, if your work is allowed to be on YouTube, Twitter, Zuckerberg Media, Musk Media, whoever, or Reddit CIA controlled media, without already agreeing to the system, you're not allowed to be on there. Just as we have bailouts in the West, Chinese big state-owned enterprises and banks have often been kept afloat by government support as well. There is little market discipline for those people who are already power. And one of the most important things is information asymmetry, which is what I actually start PhD Jung versus Hegel polymorphous mythology explanation, is the idea of information asymmetry, aka ChatGPT charges us $20 a month or whatever and scrapes all the exploits all the information on the internet and then charges for it. Seems to me the biggest hypocrisy of that bootlicking Sam Altman, Rip Aaron Schwartz. Unfortunately, capitalism for the poor and socialism for the rich captures our real societal dysfunction. Our commitment to free market principles mysteriously vanish when powerful interests and are at stake. Elites privatize gains and socialize the losses. Ordinary people are told to live with the discipline of the market, while the rich get to pay off lobbyists and create loopholes wherever they like and Nancy Pelosi their way into power. Again, the only reason I say Nancy Pelosi is because, I mean, that's the crazy part. You see, the idea of Nancy Pelosi is this whole mythic archetype now that was created by Trump in order to shift responsibility about the exact same crap that he's doing on a much wider scale that Trump is doing. So we have unequal applications of ideologies in both realms. So the question, let's just push back again. Are these just, two different ideological tax farms extracting wealth from various populations to enrich ruling classes, pay off special interests, just like feudal lords extracting rent from peasants? It's so, and we're moving into techno-feudalism in both these societies. And both the societies are using various forms of political correctness. We have, again, don't criticize the guy, political correctness. Don't, if you're not nice to Trump, fascist political correctness. We have the neoliberal identity politics political correctness that destroys solidarity and normalizes transactional solidarity. And then we have the Chinese-style political correctness where we can't talk about whatever sensitive issues that's important for them. So, obviously, the idea of taxation shouldn't be inherently exploited because there are necessary functions that people say. I don't necessarily. I take more of an anarchist position on that. But if the democracy is healthy, tax revenue is supposed to provide public goods and build the roads, infrastructure, whatever, defense. But there are progressive income taxes and corporate taxes, at least in principle, to make room for those who have greater ability to pay. But the meaningful redistribution does occur in some sense. But on the other hand, that, like, why do we have healthcare in the first place? Like, the reason we have healthcare is so that we go, and I'm talking about Canada, the reason we have healthcare is so that we go back to work, right? It's not a kind of healthcare rooted in holistic health and actually trying to deal with human health issues in a collective way. It's not trying to, it's a last ditch effort, this healthcare system, by which a whole pharmaceutical industry profits. And again, the same pharmaceutical industry that we're talking about was to the same kind of ideology that enforces the anti-shaming culture, pill shaming, slut shaming. That's the same ideology. They're both the American Psychological Association. It's really crazy. So the other side of taxation, however, is just we're trying to look at the positives of taxation, but all we have is corporate welfare, crony capitalism, government contracts contracts which goes to firms with political ties. One of my buddies, he made a game called Construction and Corruption, showing how Montreal city or Toronto, what do? We keep building bike paths and then taking the bike path down, and we keep building another one and we take it down again. Who benefits from this? Well, it's Rob Ford's political buddies that have been in rule of Ontario for the last little while, and for those are the kinds of mafia-like unions that control us today. Unfortunately, they're not collective unions. Again, they're not the kind of unions that they're extracting unions. They're not actual unions that see us all in solidarity with one another. And then so we can see better when we kind of are in between ChatGPT and DeepSeek, and we can see that Western democracies calibrate extraction, redistribution via election. Politicians who promise popular benefits or tax fairness can seem to be winning favor over exclusive rich. There were, for example, the New Deal reforms. In China, there is no electoral mechanism channel the discontent. So the party relies on performance legitimacy, and that's very important. So there is one aspect that we do need some sort of move. We do need some sort of fluidity in that political elite, because pure elite gain is not necessarily sustainable, because it can get stagnant, and that's what the argument regards. So the tax farm metaphor is apt in a sense that still need our economies to be productive. There is a constant tension between extractive and inclusive tendencies. And we can see this has been in place since Venice and Genoa. Every time there is some sort of fluidity, people get power, the dojis get too much power. So there does need to be some sort of room for continuity instead of just having a pure tax farms. Now the question is whether, for example, universal basic income in our time of AI automated economies can be helpful, and whether we have the capacity to rethink patents, rethink the idea of property and ownership. It seems like with the coming down on Reddit and Aaron Schwartz and copyright is not theft, copying is not theft, that whole idea, LibGen, Anna's Archive, all of our ability to access information, that's the main issue here, which is tied again to decentralized finance, which is more and more becoming controlled as well. As long as they control the infrastructure, Bitcoin is, and all of these decentralized finance are very limited in some sense, as long as the infrastructure controlled. So what we really need is a decentralized internet, something that I remember was popping up during Occupy. So let's try to conclude here a little bit by saying Western and Chinese models have both allowed extreme forms of wealth concentration, and we shouldn't be jingoing one or the other as true people if we are people that egalitarian wealth concentration that converts easily political influence in various ways, whether it's campaign donation in the West or party faction power in the East. Right now, the main problem here is who will watch the watcher. The answer is, I'll watch myself. Don't worry about it, which is getting really scary when, again, we think about genetic engineering, brain control, mind control, and the ultimate argument that I have. I'm trying to keep it secret for my book. It's just such an awesome argument that I can't just keep it to myself. The idea that we can read each other's brains, and that at some point we're going to reach an end of the world where, if we can reach each other's, if we can, see each other's brains at some point, if AI gets good enough, we'll be able to see each other's brains wholly, and hopefully, I think that that's a good thing. And the moment we can all see each other's brain, the moment we can see through each other, we will easily be able to, see, is this person evil? Is this person crazy? Or, did the evil actions that they take or whatever, or what was deemed evil, make sense within their model of the world? And, we'll see that, in my opinion, I think we'll see we have to come at it with pure love. And that's why I love the Gnostic kind of model, where we can see each other with pure love. And if we can see each other with pure love, because the moment that we all see each other's brains, the moment that happens, that's the same moment some people will press that nuclear button, because we'll all have access to that nuclear button, which means that in that moment in that moment of singularity, we need to basically resolve all of these kinds of contradictions, see each other with love, stop jingoism for one or the other kind of ism. Economics is not separate from power and is not separate from religion or ideology. All of these things are oikonomia. In the West, the wealthy interests bend this idea of capitalism, markets to serve them. East, party elites use this idea of socialism to cement their rule, while they have this red nobility. Question is, prosperity is only available when it's shared. Markets need ethical and prudent, and we need to find a way of dealing with the end of the world that where we can all kind of belong. We need to renew a kind of global citizenship social contract. Again, that's been eroded by this idea of anti-globalism, an unfortunate situation, because between these two forces or these various forms of mafia-controlled ideology for the poor, hypocrisy for the rich, or for the 1%, that's really the system here. We're not dealing with pure capitalism, pure communism. In the West, we say we are capitalist and we disregard rules whenever we like. In the East, they say they're socialist, and they do a lot of these socialist things. But again, why do we have healthcare? Isn't for deep health. And I'm talking about Canada again. It's for putting a Band-Aid on something. In fact, you know what? You should have a right to die. Have you considered dying? Is the meme that's happening in Canada right now under unfortunate circumstances. So thank you for listening to this. I hope that it was enlightening for you. I hope that we don't get caught up in Black Mirror, neo techno feudalism, and I hope that we can use the power of AI in a positive sense. I hope that, and again, this is an age-old debate of Plato, really, because if AI can reason, will that reasoning lead to the good and the truth? Are the good, in my bias, I guess, I believe that through Hegelian dialectic and not blocking people off and not enforcing political correctness with a cut-off culture, emotional labor commodification, with this kind of destruction of solidarity, with this you're so weird conformity enforcing ideologies in the West, and the various conformity enforcing ideologies and social structures in the East. Hopefully, between the two reasoning models of ChatGPT and DeepSeek, between that, we can find some sort of freedom. And the alternative, again, it's always been solar funkisms versus cyber funkisms. And I hope to create another channel, Solar Funkisms, where I only talk about nice things and I don't get shadow banned. So again, thank you for listening, and I hope that we can escape our neo-technic. So basically, the ideologies of capitalism versus socialism, they're both just matrices that these various societies put these like VR headsets on our cows, which we are the cattle with VR headsets arguing about capitalism versus socialism when we're entering into post-capitalist neo-feudalism, unfortunately. And it's extremely important in our time where Bruno Latour again says that the rich have abandoned us and all they're doing is building moats and bunkers and rockets to Mars while we get ready for our apocalyptic end. So once again, thank you for paying attention. Cheers.